What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central podcast. And it's been a couple weeks, but we got some news, obviously, to talk about as the New York Mets have made a couple of moves, more minor league signings, and then, of course, the trade for Jose Siri, who is in the thumbnail. We're going to talk about all of it as well as the latest rumors there is to discuss here between, obviously, Juan Soto, which everyone wants to hear about, and all the other news that is going on in Mets world. Before we jump into everything, though, please be sure to leave a like on your way in. Subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live on the channel. But how are we feeling with the off season so far? It's been a while since we've done this.
Slow. The MLB needs to find a way, and we've talked about this before, but the MLB needs to find a way to fix their free agency system because the way it just drags, it's like come on, like we compare this to NHL free agency, NFL free agency, NBA free agency, and pretty much everything in those sports happens within one day or even possibly a week. I mean, we see like dating back to the 2019 offseason when Bryce Harper and Manny Machado signed in February right before spring training. So, and we saw what happened in 2021 right before there was that lockout, and a bunch of free agents signed in that period. The MLB needs to find a way to fix their system so we could have these guys signing much quicker because this is just going to drag. And especially when you have a guy who's holding up basically the whole free agent market in terms of the position players in Juan Soto. And until he signs, no one else is going to sign because he's going to set the market for everybody else.
Yeah, and it's just annoying because I don't know how you fix this. So, like, the problem with baseball compared to every other sport is the fact that it is a luxury tax system where all the other sports are either hard cap or soft cap leagues, which I guess somewhat the MLB is with the luxury tax, but it also is a little bit different. So it's not like, it's moving as quick where everyone wants to get the deals done, see what their cap structure is looking like, where with this. And then you, of course, have the great Scott Boras playing his stupid games, making us wait the entire offseason for these guys to sign. But that's neither here nor there. It really is annoying that it is so slow because, like you said, everyone's waiting on Soto. And then with pitching, even, I mean, no one could sign really until Burns signs a contract because that's going to set the pitching market. And then we got to wait on the next tier of guys or the guys similar in that tier with, the Snells of the world and all those other guys. So, yeah, it does suck, but at least the Mets did make a move, which I think was a really good move because of the fact that, and I gave my thoughts, so obviously I'll get more of your thoughts versus reiterating my thoughts fully on the Jose Siri trade. In case anyone missed it, they acquired him from the Tampa Bay Rays for Eric Orzi, a 27-year-old relief pitcher who, of course, had a couple of innings this past year with the Mets. Did not do well in those innings, but obviously it's also been a rough road for him, given the story of him, of course, overcoming cancer throughout his career and all that other stuff. So it was a feel good moment to see him in the majors. And now he's going to end up going to Tampa Bay. Probably will be one of their best arms because that's just how the Rays work. And if it does, good for him. But the Mets get what they desperately need in a center fielder, defensive first center fielder, nonetheless, because right now you look at what they have, not a lot. They need to replace Harrison Bader, and I think the guy you, myself, and many other Met fans thought they were going to get was Cedric Mullins, just because you would think, okay, a lefty-righty platoon of him and Tyrone Taylor in the outfield made the most sense. But they get Jose Siri, which I still don't mind going with the double righties. They did it this past year with Bader and Taylor. You get a guy that plays well defensively, is good along the bases, is a little bit better in terms of health wise compared to Harrison Bader. So, because they did get very lucky that Bader didn't really miss any significant time this past year. And the most important part, you save money because this was going to cost probably north of 10 million to bring Harrison Bader back or to acquire a Michael A. Taylor who profiles similar to both of those guys. And you get Jose Siri. Your thoughts, though, on the trade overall?
Yeah, I liked it. It was a nice little sneaky pickup. Look, was it the Dominican outfielder whose initials are JS? Was it the guy that I really wanted? No, but he might come in the next couple of weeks. We'll see about that.
With four-letter first name and last name, too.
Yeah, but yeah, like I said, it was a nice little sneaky pickup by David Stearns. And look, I think last podcast we brought it up when we were talking about the free agents options in the outfield, and we really looked at the center field options. Yes, the good old men in the seats. That's our Lord and Savior right there. But we looked at the list, and the list was really bare bones. I mean, of course, you had Harrison Bader, who the Mets could have brought back. You had a guy named Michael A. Taylor, and then you also had Kevin Pillar, but I think he's also going to retire this offseason as well. So that probably would have been an option. So the market was very bare bone. And look, there was multiple options that we talked about through the trade market. Obviously, in a hypothetical Garrett Crochet trade, you could have acquired Luis Robert, or you could have went to the Orioles and acquired a guy like Cedric Mullins, like you brought up. But yeah, I like this because you're saving a lot of money, and you're basically saving a lot of money on two guys that do very similar things. And I'd probably go to say that Jose Siri is probably a little bit of the better player, because if you look at their baseball savant, they're both elite fielders. They both have decent arms, but and on the surface, they're not great overall hitters. But the one thing that Jose Siri has over Harrison Bader, which I do like, is his power and his ability to barrel up balls. Because as we've seen in modern day MLB, to win a championship, you need guys who hit the long ball, and that's what Jose Siri does. Now, listen, you look at his baseball savant page, and you go down to the bottom, and you look up, the chase rate, the whiff rate, the K rate. It's not great. He's going to strike out a lot, but listen, he's going to be your 9 hitter. If he's going to come here just to play solid defense with a good arm, also with good speed, who can steal a couple bases, and he's going to, every now and then barrel up a couple balls and hit some big home runs, then listen, obviously you take that. And also you look at the money wise. Jose Siri, when you look at arbitration this year, he's going to make about $2.5 million, and compare that to Bader's contract last year where he made $10 million. You're saving 75% off on a center fielder who, like I said, very similar to Harrison Bader. So a nice little sneaky pickup. I definitely think that, to start the season, he's going to you're going to see a little rotation with him and Tyrone Taylor in center. Obviously, you have Nimmo on left. We'll see what happens in right field. I do kind of think that this also signals the end of Starling Marte's time here in New York. I'm interested to see when they trade him, because he really doesn't have a position here. I mean, he's not a great defensive player in right field. And do you really want to move him over to DH when the guy didn't hit a home run since June last year? No, you don't. So you have a nice little platoon in center field with him and Tyrone Taylor. And it's also good because you allow some time for Drew Gilbert to develop even some more in AAA if he doesn't have a great spring training, and he still needs some time in the minors, especially with him missing a bunch of time last year with injuries.
Yeah. The only thing that sucks with the power part is when the great Eric Chavez gets his hands on him, then the power numbers might dip a bit. But all jokes aside on that, hopefully that sustains at least a bit, because this team was desperately missing that at points, and Harrison Bader just constantly putting the ball in play and just hitting into groundouts was not fun at all. Every now and then they needed at least some power out of the center field position, and at least they're going to get some of that. And I agree with you on the Marte thing entirely, and that's one thing I brought up in my video. To me, this, especially if they land Juan Soto, there is no world where Marte should be back, because where is he going to fit? Because like you said, do you want a DH that's not going to hit for power at all? Because I certainly don't. I was not happy with JD Martinez, who went an entire month without like an extra base hit. Nonetheless, just getting a guy that doesn't hit for power since June. And then besides all that, obviously the health concerns with him, and you just have way too many corner outfielders here at that point. And with Soto, if he comes here, of course, and then you have Nimmo, and you have the platoon. And either way, if they don't land Soto, I think they will pursue a corner outfielder regardless. So it's one of those things where I agree. I think Marte's just going to be gone regardless, but obviously we'll discuss that further along. And there's two narratives that are just so stupid coming out of this entire trade that aggravate me. One, it's the fact that people think this takes him out of Juan Soto, which I don't know how anyone could think that acquiring a defensive first center fielder is taking them out of acquiring a corner outfielder that's a generational talent. I know they wear the same number, got the same initials, got the same amount of letters in their first and last names and everything, but just because of that doesn't mean they're out on Juan Soto now. But regardless, that's one of the stupid narratives. And the other one that you brought up a bit is Drew Gilbert, how, this takes time away from him. To me, if anything, this opened up a path more for Drew Gilbert, because they didn't commit to a guy. Because if they committed to Harrison Bader, let's say, to $10 million next season, even if Harrison Bader was so wolf shit to the point where he should be benched, they weren't going to move him. They were going to continue to play him more likely than not and keep him on the roster because, oh, we're paying him 10 million. We don't want to have him sent down or benched or anything. So at least you have a guy who's making 2.5, where if he's bad, at least you could send him down to the minor leagues, and then you just go ahead and throw you bring up Drew Gilbert rather. And on top of that, he has 2 years of control after this. Tyrone Taylor, though, is a free agent after this year. In my opinion, this sets up a clear path where, okay, your next tandem is going to be Siri and Gilbert, and you're saving so much money on the center field position that you could allocate elsewhere down the road. And either way, again, combined between Siri, Taylor, and if you want to throw Gilbert in that mix, they have so many center field options at a very cheap price. And compare that to where they were going out and giving up multiple prospects for the Keon Broxtons of the world not too long ago. Like, let's not forget that's where this team was at one point, or overpaying Mark Hanna and then forcing Nimmo to play center field. And if Nimmo went down, it was like, oh shit, we have to put Mark Hanna or Starling Marte in center field when neither should be there. So I just don't see how anyone could think that this takes away from Drew Gilbert's playing time, and anyone could think that this is just in general a bad move. I know that the one thing that's going around on Twitter about how there was the whole thing of him defending Wander Franco and everything, and I don't want to get too deep into that because I don't know how much truth there is to it, frankly, and I don't know anything too much about it. The only thing that I'll say is this: obviously, if he did defend that, then that's stupid, but it also shouldn't, this might sound fucked up, but it also shouldn't have took a trade for people to bring that to light if we're going to talk about these things. So with that out of the way, as long as he's performing on the field and everything, and there's no drama with that shit off the field, and he's not getting into trouble with that shit, then there really shouldn't be any complaints here about this trade. And yeah, this is it. I mean, he plays elite defense, speed, 20 home run potential, and fighting ability. He likes brawls, so yeah, you get a little bit of character in there as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you, and I agree with you even more about the point of Drew Gilbert. Like, I don't see how this hurts Drew Gilbert in any way, because even like, let's say if they want to carry 5 outfielders next year, I don't think they will. But hypothetically, let's say they do, and of course you have your left fielder, your right fielder, and you have your 2 center fielders in Siri and Taylor. You know, you could try to mold in Drew Gilbert nice and easy and into playing one of the corner spots in the beginning, and then as he gets more acclimatized and more comfortable in the majors, you eventually move him over to center field in the years to come. Because as you said, Tyrone Taylor next year, he's going to be a free agent, and Jose Siri has another year of control with another year of arbitration. So Gilbert and Siri eventually will probably be the tandem in center field. So I don't agree with the narrative that this is going to hurt Drew Gilbert. I think this is only going to help him. And listen, it gives him a little bit more time in AAA to develop, like I mentioned, because he basically missed all of last year in AAA due to injuries. And yeah, I mean, also on Jose Siri, I'm sure he's probably happy that he doesn't have to play his home games next year in a minor league stadium. Sorry, Tampa Bay Rays, but you know, it is what it is. And I mean, yeah, listen, shout out to Eric Orsi. Obviously, great story with him. 2-time cancer survivor, made the majors last year. Had a couple rough outings, especially the one in Pittsburgh where he didn't even record an out. But listen, knowing the Tampa Bay Rays, Eric Orsi next year is going to win AL reliever of the year. So I wouldn't be surprised about that because that's just what the Rays do. But I do think that this could be a trade where it's a win-win for both sides. You know, the Rays get a nice little reliever who they could potentially work on and develop him, and the Mets get a platoon guy in the center field to, split the time between him and Taylor, and then also help the development time of Drew Gilbert. So yeah, it's, for me, this is a win-win trade for everybody all around.
Yeah, I agree, and especially with the fact that Orzi's probably not even going to get a lot. He probably wasn't going to pitch here a lot because the Mets are really trying to develop the pitching lab here and adding a lot more arms to the system, which obviously we'll get into that. So there was really no place for Orzi either way. Like, it's not one of those things where I'm going to lose sleep. It sucks, obviously, to lose arms because of the fact that arms just are so valuable in today's game. But when you add a Dylan Covey and when you add all these other arms that they've been adding, you could you could just see that the Mets are clearly shoving a guy like Orzi down in the depth chart a bit, who only does realistically have one solid pitch. And if they're gonna do that, that becomes an expendable piece, because you could find guys that have. I mean, we saw them do it this offseason with a guy like Covey. I mean, you sign a guy who is he has one really really good pitch, and the rest of them are kind of projects. You add that to the system, and they added it with a couple of other guys like Herget and all these other pieces that they've added. You could find those guys, and it made him expendable. And if the Rays figure something out with him with his other pitches, then again, good for him and good for the Rays. But it's one of those things where it's just wasn't going to work here, and it is what it is. But did you have any more thoughts on the trade before we segue into more things?
Now we can move on.
So let's move on to the things that I mentioned, where the Mets did add a couple of minor league arms, a couple of bats as well. I think actually, yeah, 2 bats and 2 arms it was, right? So they added, no, sorry, it was 3 arms and 1 bat. That's right. They added Alex Carrillo, right? That's how you say his last name. And then they add Rico Garcia, Donovan Walton, and then Justin Hageman. So a couple of arms there. Interesting stuff with some of these. The youngest one of them was, who was the youngest out of them? Wasn't it Hageman, right? No, sorry, it was Carrillo. He's the youngest. So at 27, you're probably not going to see much of these guys, to be honest with you, unless they have to dig really, really deep into the pipeline. The one that's obviously the most intriguing, just because he was in AAA this past year, is Hageman, and he had a 4.91 ERA down there in AAA with the Boston Red Sox system, a 1.32 WHIP. So not the best numbers. You look at the home runs per 9, not great. 2.1, is prone to the long ball. He's also prone to walking batters a decent amount with a 3.0 walks per 9. Strikeouts per 9, a little under 10, so not the worst there. And he does have a 4-pitch mix. He throws a sinker, has a slider, changeup, a cutter that he utilizes all together. So maybe there's something that they find in him. And in terms of the other ones, I don't really have much info on these guys. I mean, sure, Rico Garcia is also somewhat interesting because he has thrown in the major leagues, got a couple innings with the Nationals this past year, but didn't really do much in those innings. Walton, he's played in a couple of major league games, hasn't really done much. So they're just filling out depth. There's really not much to add. These are your replacements for just guys that were in the margins, like your DJ Stewarts of the world and all that other stuff, but hopefully more athletic than a guy like DJ Stewart in Walton's case. And he's probably lower on the depth chart than him, but and then in terms of the arms, you need to fill out depth for some of the guys that you were losing, like an Orzi.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's just these are just some minor league arms that and a position player that they're going to add. I mean, look, the hope if you're David Stearns, when you look at Garcia, Hageman, and Carrillo, out of the 3, if you're lucky, you maybe hope that one you find a way to fix and he works out, and maybe he can have an effect on the majors. I know Garcia was the most recent one to pitch in the majors in 2023, 3-pitch mix with a 4-seamer, changeup, and curveball. Not great when you look at the numbers. 334 batting average on the 4-seamer, a 417 batting average on the changeup, and a 333 batting average on the curveball. So there obviously is some work needed to be done, but listen, you got to stick these guys in the minors, see what they do, hopefully see, how the pitching lab works on them. And like I said, you hope that one of the three arms, finds a way to come up here and it has at least some impact on the major league team. Other than that, they're just depth arms, and a depth bat, like we mentioned.
Yeah, really the only hope, honestly, you could have with Garcia is the fact that he at least throws somewhat hard. Not too hard for a reliever, but could top out around 96 with the fastball. So there's at least something there. But again, you're probably not going to see most of these guys even touch the major leagues. And again, that's in the worst case scenario that they do, or maybe the best case. Obviously, best case is they're really thriving and forcing their way up here. Worst case is that they're only here because the team is completely depleted with injuries. So Yeah, a couple little signings there. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, but we'll move
No,
on if not.
no, that's it.
Yeah, just thought I'd throw that in the mix. But now we'll move on to the heavy hitting topic, Juan Soto, because that's what everyone's here for at the end of the day. Everyone wants to hear what's going on with Juan Soto, especially if you are not active on social media and say we are somehow one of your few sources among other Met YouTubers. Well, here you go. We are going to provide info for you. There's really nothing, though. There's honestly no info of significance. The Mets ended up meeting with Soto in California somewhat recently, and the meeting went well. Like, there's really not much to take away, but we heard that about the Yankees meeting. We heard that about the meeting with the Red Sox. We heard that about every meeting that he's been a part of, pretty much, that it went well. So it's not like there's really anything to take away. There's been a couple of intriguing things that came out of the Yankees meeting. I don't know how much truth there is to it, but apparently he was talking heavily to Howe about the farm system and how he has questions about it. Again, I don't know how true that report is, but if there is truth to it, that is an intriguing conversation. And everything else has just been Boris just puppeting multiple reporters, and we're pretty much hearing the same shit from everyone, that the Mets will be the leading bidders. The Mets are probably the favorites. And I personally feel, I personally still have my worries, because nothing could be nice sometimes, and for the most part in Mets world. But Matt's the voice of reason. Matt's the voice of optimism. So I'll let you talk about your thoughts with all this.
I mean, listen, I've said since last year, I've said during the season, I've said after the World Series ended that I'm confident the Mets will land Juan Soto, and that's not, out of bullshit reasoning. That's just because, listen, at the end of the day, Steve Cohen has the most money. He's the richest owner in the MLB, and he, in my opinion, I think this is the guy he really wants. He still hasn't landed that big fish in terms of free agent signings, and this is the guy. Listen, like we mentioned before in the last podcast, 26-year-old, world class, generational player. This is the guy where you rip up a blank check and say, "Here you go, Juan. Write down whatever number you want. I'm gonna give it to you." And I think he will. Listen, I'm gonna stay confident on this until Soto essentially picks where he wants to go, and until the ultimately when Jeff Passan drops the tweet on where he's gonna sign. Look, I mean, look, we've heard multiple reports. Ken Rosenthal said it. John Heyman said it, aka the Boris Puppet. Um, our everyone's favorite Mets reporter Buster Olney says that he expects Juan Soto to land as a Met. I mean, look, I ultimately think he's going to be a Met just because we're going to offer the most money. And look, listen, I heard, of course, we heard that Michael K mentioned that that he heard from an inside source that Steve Cohen is going to outbid anybody by $50 million. Listen, and that's ultimately what I want to hear. I want to hear that Steve Cohen is going to go to the limits where no other owner is going to go to, because this is why you have that amount of money. You have to weaponize that money. You have to make other owners feel uncomfortable. And listen, if it takes 700, 700. If it's 750, 750, 800, 850, 900. You push the amount of money up until other owners feel uncomfortable and they feel that they have to drop out of the bidding. Ultimately, and that's what ultimately I think is going to happen.
I have a lot of skepticism with the Michael K report, only because of the fact that it's a little weird to me how someone that is friends with Boris, and he brags about it all the time on his show because he loves to brag about every single thing, and one of the most fragile guys on the planet. But either way, he is close with Boris, the Yankees play-by-play guy. It's a little odd to me that report came from him, and that does worry me a bit about how much truth there is to that, because to me that just sounds like a deal where it's like, how up your offer and we'll find a way to make it work here potentially. That's what I interpret that as potentially, because again, that report could have came from anyone, and the fact that it came from Michael K makes me feel weird, and the fact that no one has backed up that report either, because you would think that as much as John Heyman's a puppet, as much as all these other insiders might be puppets to Boris, it's a little sus that no one else has backed up that report. So I don't know how much I believe that. I do believe some of the other stuff that is being said, though, about how the Mets will be the highest bidder and all that other stuff. I don't know if it's going to be to the 50 million degree. That's where I do worry, is that it is a leverage tactic and that the Yankees will at least come close to matching. And I worry about that. I really hope it doesn't get to that, because if it does, then Cohen's got a lot to address and explain to us, because he needs to blow whatever offer out of the water. I mean, this is why we gassed up him coming here. This is why every Met fan calls him King Cohen and all this other stuff. If you're getting even in a close bid with him, to me, you got explaining to do. But that at least sussed me out a bit. And I also do feel a little weird that a lot of the teams that we're hearing are like the favorites are rivals of the Yankees. I mean, the Mets, crosstown rival, the Red Sox, division rival, the Rays even making a phone call. And then, which I don't know if there's any truth to that. To me, that's like if I tried to call Livy Dunn and ask her out on a date, because there's just no chance. And the Blue Jays are another team. The Dodgers, when you hear those teams are the ones heavy in the mix, to me, that worries me.
Well, I mean, I get that from your perspective. I do. But at the same time, I look at that and just say, well, those are the teams that can realistically afford Juan Soto. We're not going to expect to see the Pirates, the A's, the Rockies offer those type of contracts. They're not. It's going to be, I mean, also we learned a couple of days ago that the Phillies are going to have a meeting. So, I mean, when you have teams like the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Blue Jays, the Phillies, all those teams, like those are the guys that you expect, because those are the guys that can offer that type of money to sign Juan Soto. The only team I'm skeptical about, if you take away the race point of view, is the Red Sox, because I just don't believe that John W. Henry and FSG are going to offer that type of money, especially when they've been very cheap in terms of signing star players over the last couple of years. I mean, and you date back to 2020 when they traded Mookie Betts in the offseason. We've seen how that trade has worked out for them and how well that it's worked out for the Dodgers. It's been complete night and day in terms of that. But yeah, I continue to stay confident, because I really do believe that Cohen is going to blow everybody out of the water. That's just my personal belief. And listen, I know that Hal the other day had an interview, and he kind of sent out mixed messages in terms of where one of the reporters asked him how confident you are in signing Juan Soto, and he mentioned that we'll be in the mix. We'll be one of those teams, and he really didn't say how confident he was. So in the same time, that sounds like, okay, like you're not really sure. But then in another part of the interview, he said that we have the capability of signing every free agent. At that point, then she was like, okay, then go do it. I think, we look at this and we say like, oh, leverage. The Mets are being used as leverage. I think, in my personal opinion, every single team is being used as leverage. I really do think that Juan Soto is just ultimately going to go to the highest bidder. And I don't listen. Maybe the Mets do have to pay a little bit extra. Maybe they do. I don't know. I don't have sources, but I think that they'll be willing to do it. That's just my personal opinion on that.
I'm just having a hard time because, and I know that's such a difference between the last time we did this versus now, but there's always a catch with this team, man. There's just always a catch. Like we heard George Springer a few years ago. It was like, oh, no doubt the Mets are the favorites to land George Springer. Buster Olney betting the farm that they would get George Springer. Didn't happen. Last year, even, they were used as leverage for guys like Eric Fetty and Lucas Giolito. Like they didn't even they weren't able to scrape the bottom of the barrel there. And then the Carlos Correa thing, obviously out of their control. The Bauer thing, we know how that went. The Scherzer thing, it's going to have to be similar to that, where they blow out of the water other teams like they did with Scherzer, because that took a lot of money and a lot of convincing to get Scherzer to come here, and it's going to take that. And I hope it happens. Believe me, I am the first person buying a Juan Soto jersey if it does happen. But I just feel so I feel so worried. These have been the most stressful weeks of my life, truthfully, with a free agent because I have never been this desperate for a free agent to sign, and this month is moving so slow, and it just feels like the next 2 to 3 weeks because they think I forgot who it was, what insider or what reporter. I think it was Passan actually that thinks he's gonna sign before the winter meetings or right when it starts. Maybe it feels like these next 2 weeks are gonna just take forever to go by because I just need a decision. Like if you're not gonna come here, just fucking do it already. Rip the band-aid off so I can move on with my life. Like I am tired of checking my phone. I'm in the shower checking my phone. I'm tired of it. I just need something to happen with this already.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I think he ultimately makes the decision during the winter meetings. And I think the winter meetings it's 4 days. So during one of those 4 days, I think it's from December 8th to December 12th. So I think within one of those days, we'll ultimately get the decision. But we also heard reports that Soto, in terms of the meetings, he was asking about the future. Are you going to invest? And we heard that he wants to go to a competitive team. Well, I look at the Mets, right? This is a team that just came off an 89 win season, went to the NLCS, has an MVP caliber player in Francisco Lindor. The infrastructure and the base of where you build from the team, it looks a lot better than it was, compared to 2023. Or if this is not the Mets of 2012, 2013. This is a nice now. Hopefully, it's going to continue, but hopefully, the stability and the foundation has finally been laid. And I think, in terms of, ultimately offering the money to convince him, I do ultimately think if he really does care about winning it, I think he does ultimately as long with, getting paid as well. But, I think that I just listen, could he be using the Mets as leverage? Sure. I just don't think personally he's using the Mets specifically as leverage. Like I said, I think everyone's being used as leverage here. And I think ultimately whoever gives the highest offer, that may be the Yankees, that may be the Red Sox, that may be the Blue Jays, that may be the Mets. I think it's going to be the Mets, so I think he's going to be a Met. And then you also have the ones where, coming out of the Yankees meetings where uh, not that Hal said this, but there were reports saying that that Juan Soto was asking, making sure Hal Steinbrenner and whether they're gonna spend money on top of him and keep improving the team over and over again. And we've heard Hal Steinbrenner over the last couple of years mention that he doesn't really want to be over the top level luxury tax for a long time. It's not sustainable. Well, listen, Hal, like if you're gonna pay Juan Soto $50 million a year, like you're gonna be over that third tier of the luxury tax for a while. And on top of that, you talking about the contracts that they already have with their big time players in terms of Judge, Cole, Stanton, Rodon. They already have a lot of money tied up to their main core guys. And then on top of that, Soto, that's going to increase. And then you look at the roster, depending on where you want to pay Jazz Chisholm, like let's say if they keep him at third, for example, well, they're going to need a brand new first baseman because Anthony Rizzo's gone. Depending on what happens with Gleyber Torres, they're going to need a second baseman. And Alex Verdugo is a left. He's also a free agent, so they're going to have to, add a left fielder as well. So I just don't know how far the Yankees are willing to go because ultimately I do think it's going to come down between the Mets and Yankees. And like I said before, Steve Cohen just has to use his money and his ability to make other owners feel uncomfortable. I think he has to push this as far as he can. Like I said, if it takes 800 million, spend 800 million. If it takes 900, you spend 900. Sure, may the contract be shitty on the back end part of that deal. Absolutely, because he's going to be close to 40 years old, being paid $60 million a year. Like for example, if you pay him $900 million, yeah, it's not going to look great. But if you look at it in terms of a 15-year deal, if you're getting 10 to 11 really good years of Juan Soto when he's getting paid that type of money, and you get 2, maybe 3 World Series out of that, that money is absolutely 100% worth it. So, and listen, the Mets can only do what's in their control. And what's in their control is how much money they can offer. So you got to offer as much money as you possibly can. And listen, if there's that little bit of doubt in Juan Soto that ultimately like maybe his his ideal thing is to go back to the Yankees, you have to put him into a position where he has to make that tough choice of leaving money on the table. Because, if you're making him come to a decision where he has to leave $100 million on the table, like that's a hard decision to make. And then listen, I know the guy's already a multimillionaire and he's going to make a shitload of money, whatever he takes on his contract. But if that's all they have to do, leave him with a hard decision to make. And listen, if he leaves $100 million, if he leaves $100 million on the table and signs with the Yankees, then at that point, I really can't be mad. I just got to say fair play. But like I said, all the Mets got to do is what's in their power, and that's offer as most money as possible and make other owners such as Hal Steinbrenner uncomfortable with going up that offer.
That's definitely the part that I agree with. That like I can't be mad. I'm definitely not going to be mad, I should say, if it comes down to a scenario where the Mets offer more money, especially an obnoxious amount. Like if they're offering, to me, it's got to be at least 25 million more to where I could look at it and say, all right, well, if he left that much money on the table to stay or go elsewhere, then I can't be mad at the Mets. The Mets tried, they did everything they could. But if it comes out that the Mets only offered, like, I don't know, they either matched the top offer or they only offered like 10 million more, to that I can't justify it, because if you're truly going to go all in, you might as well go all in at that point, because all it's going to do is raise the AAV. If anything, it's not going to change anything really else. It's just going to change how much you're paying him annually. And I get that you need flexibility at points, because that's the argument from the people that don't want the Mets to get him, which again I think is ludicrous, because this is a generational talent. There is nobody that you could get that is going to equate the amount of wins as Juan Soto is going to. I mean, you're talking about I forgot how much WAR he had this past year, but you're talking about a guy that is consistently amongst the top 3 in terms of wins above replacement year in and year out. You are just not going to find a guy of that magnitude anywhere else, and you're not going to be able to find multiple players to do what he does. I don't care if they could get Corbin Burns and Pete Alonso and bring back Pete Alonso. To me, that does not equate the value as bringing in a no doubt top 5 player in all of Major League Baseball and a chance for someone to be the face of the franchise. So yeah, to me, I agree with that point entirely, that they have to be or if they don't get outbid, if they don't get outbid by a significant amount, then I can't be mad at the Mets at that point, because it is what it is. But like you said, they have to put him in that uncomfortable position. I don't know how much truth there is to that one report that came out a couple of days ago. I don't think it's true, considering no one has backed it up about the $660 million offer, because if that is where the Mets truly are starting, if that's true, then that gives me a little more confidence, because if you're starting at that price, that tells me you're willing to go to even 750 at that point, at minimum. Even go to 750 if it really comes down to another team being willing to pay that price. And at that point, it would be hard for me to believe he's not coming here. But unfortunately, I don't think there is any truth to that report, because there wasn't years attached to that report, and there wasn't anything else to tell me that was real. But again, if it is, then the Mets, I feel great about their chances all of a sudden about getting him.
Well, look, we all know Scott Boras, right? Scott Boras, every time one of his new guys comes on the market, he wants to set a new record, especially with the big guys. And you better believe that he wants to break a record, like we mentioned on the last podcast. He wants to break a record in terms of that Ohtani contract. It's not going to be AAV wise if you take out all the deferrals, because that's $70 million. I don't think Soto's going to get $70 million AAV a year, but he could definitely break the total amount of money. Ohtani was 700, and in my personal prediction on last podcast, I said I think the contract's going to be 15 years for 750, and I personally don't know, because like I said, I think it's going to come down ultimately between the Mets and the Yankees for Juan Soto. With Hal Steinbrenner, I definitely do think that he'll be willing to go in the 600s, 600, 650. I think he will be willing to go that. 700, I'm skeptical, but I think he would just about go there. I don't know how willing he'd be, especially if the number goes 750 800, and it just keeps rising. I ultimately, I don't know, and I don't have confidence that he would be willing to go to those places. That's why I said for the Mets and Steve Cohen, you have to weaponize your money. You have to put other owners in an uncomfortable spot. I mentioned putting Juan Soto in an uncomfortable spot of having to make him make that tough decision of leaving that amount of money on the table. Well, you got to put other owners in an uncomfortable spot as well. It's like, do I really want to? I know Juan Soto is a great player, he's a generational talent, but do I really want to spend $800 million? No, but Steve Cohen, why not? Because we mentioned generational talents like Juan Soto don't come up on the market, especially at this age, 26 years old. Like, you're going to get at least 10 to 11 really good years of Juan Soto. So really, there is no amount of money that I'm not really uncomfortable to going, in terms of realistic wise. Obviously, if we're going over $1 billion, then at that point it's like, but and if you look at the difference in terms of AAV wise, like I mentioned, 750 for 15 years, that's a 50 million AAV. Well, listen, if you really have to go and up that AAV by another 10 million, and you have to give them a $900 million deal for 15 years, do it, because it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it. If you're telling me that you have a chance to win, 2, maybe 3 World Series in that contracts, you know what? I'd be willing to go on an extra 10 million a year. That's so, I don't even know words to describe it, but it's just like, yeah, just go do it. And then, like, you brought up the Scherzer point of view where, he had to overpay for Scherzer. Well, I mean, listen, if you're willing to overpay, $43 million for an over the hill starting pitcher who what at that time was 38, 39 years old, well, then, yeah, you better do it for a 26-year-old still in his prime generational talent in Juan Soto. So, I mean, like I mentioned, no excuses. And like I've stated time and time and time again, I'm confident that the Mets will do whatever it takes. And we've heard Beltran say it, and other guys throughout the media says it, that Steve Cohen's going to do whatever it takes. I do believe it. I really do believe it, because this is the guy you do it. You do it for.
Yeah, that part I do agree with, where it's inexcusable if you're willing to go over the top for a 40-year-old starting pitcher and not a 26-year-old generational talent. And as a customer who spent $60 multiple times on parking this postseason, I demand you to put that towards Juan Soto. If you're listening, Steve, and men in the seats,
Listen,
I demand you, for my $60 parking, to utilize that towards Juan Soto.
Listen, I got an extra $5 here. So if you really want this, you can have it.
Yeah. And the jersey sales. I mean, I would
Oh,
buy multiple Juan Soto jerseys, but so they'll get the money back. So just get it done. But did you have anything else to talk about with Soto before we move on?
No, we can move on.
All right. So in terms of other news to talk about, just because this offseason's not just about Juan Soto, there is, of course, other free agents that the Mets have to target in terms of the starting pitching market and in terms of just the infield in general. There is a rumor going around about how Cody Bellinger is on the market now, and I can tell you right now, I would love for the Mets to be in on him. Do I think they're going to? No. There is also this to it. They could maybe be in the market for Crochet, and to answer, will the Mets acquire him? I don't think so. I would love Crochet and Robert. I don't think Robert's even an option now that they have center field addressed. So there's really no use in acquiring him. But in terms of Crochet, I would definitely love for the Mets to acquire Garrett Crochet. But again, I just don't think they're going to. Just, there's too many teams in the mix, and it's going to cost a lot of prospects to do it. And especially when you're trying to sell Juan Soto on the fact that your farm system's good, you don't want to deplete your farm for Garrett Crochet right now. As much as I want him and as much as I think it would be worth giving up part of the farm system for him, I just don't think they're right now in a position to where they're going to go out and get Garrett Crochet. But I would love Cody Bellinger. I think that's a guy that you should move prospects for, because if you're telling me you could add another left-handed back, given the fact that this team desperately need it, and a guy that could play first base and center field, and even some of the corner outfield positions, and DH as well if you need him to, that's something I'd be open to, because that's better to me than overpaying Christian Walker, who's 34 years old right now. That's better to me than putting Marte as the DH or whatever else they're going to do. I like that idea a lot if they were to go that route, but what are your thoughts on both of those as potential targets with Crochet and then Bellinger?
Yeah, like with Crochet, like we mentioned last podcast, he would be my top target in terms of starting pitching, just because he's cheaper, he's 25 years old, he's already got ace caliber stuff, but like you mentioned, you don't know what the return, what the White Sox are going to be asking, and there is a lot of money. I mean, no, sorry, there's a lot of teams involved in that in trade talks. We heard the Red Sox, Mets, Phillies, and guys like that, and probably I would think that the Red Sox would probably be number one, just because they have a little bit of a deeper farm system, and also you factor that in with they acquired Chris Sale from the White Sox all those years ago, so it's probably who also was a lefty, so you might well see a part two where they acquire Garrett Crochet. If they don't acquire Garrett Crochet, then probably my guy that I want them to target in terms of ace caliber stuff on the free agent market would be Blake Snell, because like I mentioned before, with Burns, I like Burns. Do I want to commit 8 years to him on that type of money where he probably wants around $25 to $30 million a year? No, I do not. Even though we all know that he pitched in Milwaukee and Stearns has plenty. He has a relationship with him. Max Fried also another option, but I do think that he'll probably head out west, whether that's with the Giants, the Padres, or the Dodgers. So I don't think he wants to pitch on the East Coast unless you offer him a boatload of money. But Blake Snell would be my number one target, just because I think you can get him on a cheaper, not a cheaper deal, but less years. Maybe you can get him on a 4-5 year deal. I don't know exactly what type of money he's looking for, but if you can get him around 25-30 million around there. Listen, he's a guy that's pitched in big games. He looked a lot better after his slow start last year. So Snell will be my number one guy. And then in terms of Cody Bellinger, look, I would like to acquire Cody Bellinger. I think, like you mentioned, very versatile, can play the outfield, can play center field as well, as long as with the corners, can DH, play first base. So, if they don't bring back Pete, you could slot in Cody Bellinger and keep Vientos at third. Or, if you want to move Vientos over to first, you could, move Bellinger to the outfield, especially if they don't end up landing Juan Soto or don't want to, give a contract to Anthony Santander. So, yeah, so Bellinger will be a nice little backup option just in case they don't land their top targets. But yeah, I don't know what the Cubs would be looking for in terms of a trade package, though. Like, I don't know exactly what they're interested in. But listen, if it makes sense and it's doable, then yeah, why not? I'd be interested in Cody Bellinger. Obviously, he had that nice little renaissance year in 2023 after a really horrible 2022 in his last year in LA. Had a little bit of a dip this year in terms of the power numbers. Went down 2023 and 881 OPS to 751 OPS last year. Went from 26 home runs in 23 to 18 last year. So there was a little dip in performance, but I do think that if you bring him here to Citi Field, you let him hit him. He's also a lefty, so you let him hit towards the Coca-Cola porch. I do think you might be able to see some power surge in Cody Bellinger. So yeah, like I mentioned, if it makes sense in terms of prospect wise, then yeah, bring him in. Like, I don't have a problem with it.
That on top of the fact that he's putting up the numbers he is in Chicago, I think if you bring him here, that's gonna help him out a lot. Because obviously that's not really a hitter friendly park by any means, and I like the idea of bringing him in to a guy that has a good pitch selection. I really don't know how much he's going to cost, though, like you mentioned. That's really what it comes down to. And that's the thing that you have to worry about, because you don't want to overpay too much for him, especially when the Cubs shouldn't have much leverage. I mean, they're looking to shed salary clearly here with this move. So the Cubs don't really have a lot of leverage, and it shouldn't cost much to get him, but realistically, do I envision the Mets even spending there? No. To be honest with you, I just have a hard time believing that they're gonna go down that route. I'm not complaining if they do, but we'll see what happens. In that regard, in terms of other names that they've been linked to, they were linked to Alex Bregman, and then I saw the report of how much money he wants, and I think that Boris and Bregman are smoking really good shit if they think that he's gonna come anywhere close to the Manny Machado deal, or even pass it nonetheless. I would love whatever they're smoking because that must be really, really good shit, like next level shit. If they think that, because there's just not a chance in hell that Bregman's worth that type of money. And the other name that they're linked to is Nolan Arenado via the trade market potentially, and that's a name that I am not interested in at all. I know some fans like the idea of potentially putting him in a winning environment and maybe he will bounce back. I don't see anything that tells me he will do that. Looking at his Savant page and looking just in general at the past few years, he's been rapidly declining in terms of the barrel rates and the exit velos and all that other stuff. That's a guy that I'm not looking to. That's a guy that I don't want to experiment with. Like, we already went down the rabbit hole of doing this type of shit with Robinson Cano. I'm not about bringing in Nolan Arenado and taking on that contract unless the Cardinals are eating pretty much all the contract and getting it down to like 10 million to the point where, all right, maybe you take a flyer on that. But outside of that, I'm not moving mountains and I'm not paying the full contract to get him. At that point, I'd rather just go get Cody Bellinger by a long shot.
Yeah, I agree. I was about to bring that up if you didn't. Like, this has Robinson Cano 2.0 written all over it, especially, because we've also heard that the Cardinals would be open to trading Ryan Hesley as well, who won National League Reliever of the Year. So you basically would look at a Ryan Hesley, Nolan Arenado 2.0 trade with a Diaz Cano trade. But no, I have no interest in Nolan Arenado. Look, he was a great player a couple of years ago. If this was 2020, if this was 2020 when the Rockies were first interested in moving him, yeah, of course I would have been all open to getting Nolan Arenado because he was still an elite player at that time. Listen, the defense is still there, but he's 33 years old. That's going to start to decrease over the coming years, and then also his power numbers have just decreased. I mean, you look at 2020, hit 30 home runs with an 891 OPS. You bring it now 2 years later, that's down to 16 home runs and a 719 OPS. I really have no interest in trading for Nolan Arenado. And then, yeah, with the Bregman one, would I like to acquire and sign a guy like Bregman? Yeah, because, listen, he's a playoff performer, two-time World Series champion. He knows what it takes to win, and he knows what it takes to play in the postseason. But, yeah, if Scott Boras and him think he's getting that type of money, well, no. And hello, Artie Moreno, because you could head out to Los Angeles and man third base. You can, tag team with what's it called, Anthony Rendon, and have a nice time there. But yeah, I'm not. Yeah, if that's the type of money that they're looking for, then that's a hard pass for me.
Hey, Bregman said he was willing to move to second base, so don't rule out the possibility of those two playing together, being the Shaq and Kobe of Wash players rotting out in Anaheim.
Along with Jorge Soler in the outfield.
Oh my god, yeah, I forgot about that shit. I don't know what the fuck
And
they're doing.
Darno behind the plate.
Yeah, and then who was the other guy? Kevin Newman they got.
Yeah.
Because brilliant. Yeah, because that's gonna make you competitive. All these moves that they're making.
They signed Kyle Hendricks as well. Don't forget about that. That's their new ace.
Oh yes, how could I forget about that too? Yeah, I mean, that's a move that's at least like if any other team made that move for Kyle Hendricks, I'd be like, all right, a 1-year deal, and maybe you could fix him in the pitching lab. The Angels just don't have a pitching lab at all. I would be shocked if they have a computer anywhere in the facility. That would really surprise me. So there's just no way. But I think Bregman's going to be the worst Asian contract out of any, and it doesn't matter if he gets as much as he thinks. Doesn't matter if he gets 300. Doesn't matter if he gets 250. I think that contract's going to age poorly. I have no interest in him at all unless he's playing basically for free, honestly. I know that sounds stupid probably to some people, or like if he's signing for 20 million a year, then maybe you could convince me a little bit, but I still would be very weary about giving him a long-term deal because you look at his hit chart, it is pretty much all to the Crawford boxes, and that's not leaving the ballpark at Citi Field. You are going to see him hitting the constant pop-outs. You're going to see him constantly hitting deep fly balls, never hitting home runs. I could tell you right now, if he leaves the Astros, you are going to see him regress to like a 15 home run at bat. I would be very shocked unless he goes to a team that also plays in a very hitter friendly park. Like if he goes to Boston, which he won't because they just have no room for him there. Uh, but if he went to a team like that, I'm just saying, then that would be different, and maybe he would keep the power numbers up. But if he goes to a team like the Angels, I can tell you right now, he's not hitting north of 25 home runs year in and year out like he's been. He's gonna drop to like a 15 home run guy. That's why I'd have no interest in him being here, because the guy's best season was when the balls were juiced, and outside of that, he's been a solid player, but not a guy I'm opening up the checkbook for. I mean, sure, an 800 OPS guy consistently, a guy that, again, you look at the home run totals, you see 25 plus home runs each season, you think you're going to get good value there. But again, for a guy that really, really benefits off of the Crawford boxes, I'm not interested in going that route at all. That's just me. I think that it would be a stupid idea. And if he does good elsewhere, good for him. But I just don't see a contract, any contract that he gets aging well.
Yeah, the only really guy, because I mean, even now I'm looking at the free agent market for like second, third baseman or like shortstops, guys who could play the infield. It's not great. Like there isn't a lot of depth. I mean, other besides like Willie Adames, like I'm not really interested. I mean, and that's the top tier guys. I mean, like if you want to go get a guy like Yohan Moncada
I would be interested in
as a nice
Makata.
little buy low option, I could kind of get behind that. But I mean, you really look. I mean, I know he's a first baseman, but call Paul Goldschmidt, no interest in him. Glaber Torres, forget about it. I don't want him anywhere near the Mets. The guy can't play defense or run the bases. Ha-Seong Kim, I think he's going to stay on the West Coast. I mean, you have Jorge Polanco. I mean, okay, sure, maybe, but other than that, I mean, like a nice little sneaky like lower tier guys. Like in terms of the top guys, there really is not a lot of options.
Yeah, I'm not interested um at all in a lot of these guys. I'm really not. It's so weird how the Adamas thing just like there was so much talk about him, and then out of nowhere it's just like died quickly. So that whole thing is weird. I'd be very interested though, and I know that people are going to be against it. I would be more than open to the Mets adding a guy like Moncada. I think that he would be a sneaky good, like you said, buy low type ad. Where would you exactly want him to play? Ideally, I would put him at third or even as the DH. I don't mind it. I know he doesn't have the most power numbers, but if you look at every single season he plays, the guy doesn't stay healthy, which that's the issue though, that if you sign him, you really run the risk of him not playing a lot. But I wouldn't hate the idea of bringing him in as like a third base, second base option. If you were to replace Jose Iglesias, he's way less athletic than him. That's the only other thing that you have to worry about. But I wouldn't hate the idea. Outside of that, like you mentioned, I mean, there's nothing. The only other infielder I'm maybe interested in to play first base for a year is Carlos Santana. Like a 1 year deal for Carlos Santana, I could get behind that. He's Mr. Consistent. He is a guy that is going to give you pretty much the same numbers every single season, and that's a guy that I would be more than open to the Mets signing. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but
I mean, yes, Santana, look, he's up there in age, but he does hit for power. Like I said, he's consistent. You know, he'll hit for power until he comes here, and then the great Eric Chavez will make him a contact hitter who's telling them, you know, to go opposite field and hit bloop singles. But I mean, yeah, look, as a first base option, if Vientos is comfortable at third base and he doesn't want to move to first base, and there's really no other options, like, you know, you don't want to overpay for Christian Walker, or if you don't want to overpay for Pete at first base, then yeah, probably, yeah, Carlos Santana would be a guy that I'd consider.
yeah, he's another one that has good pitch selection, and he also plays a really good first base for a guy that's up there in age. He was in the 97th percentile in OAA this past year, so he's a guy that's still getting it done and playing good at first base. So I'd be very on board if they wanted to go that route. Will they? Probably not. but we'll see how this offseason shakes out. Because, like you mentioned, that kind of ties this all together. Nothing's going to happen until Soto signs, and that's the unfortunate part, that we are going to have to wait until December for the floodgates to open unless Soto decides to sign within the next couple days or the next week, which I would be very surprised at this rate if it happens, considering we're not even hearing anything about offers outside of that one rumor, which again, I think is bullshit. But unless we're surprised and it happens, then we're going to have to wait until December for anything really to happen. So,
Yeah, like yeah, like you were saying, like in terms of other than that one report by Erga that said there was a 660 offer, which pretty much everyone has debunked. You know, in terms of Rosenthal, Heyman, they've all said that they haven't heard anything in terms of money wise being discussed in those meetings. So, and listen, in terms of, you know, if money was never exchanged in those meetings, then you're definitely going to expect a couple weeks of tough negotiations. But I mean, like I said, I'd probably expect them in the next 3 weeks to sign, because in the next 3 weeks you could have the winter meetings from the 8th to the 12th. So, and like I said, I think that's when he's going to sign.
I'm hoping it's just before then, like, just to let this shit get done. Because then, if it happens before, then the winter meetings is actually going to be exciting, because you're going to see a lot of players sign then at the winter meetings, and that could really make for an exciting week. And especially if that's when we do our next episode, since it's really hard to do this weekly when there's not a lot to talk about. If we could get to December and they could just start, everyone could just start signing during the winter meetings, that would make for a really exciting week or two. And then it finally starts to be like, okay, we could actually talk about how this roster is shaping out and talk about expectations for each player next season, all that other stuff. So hopefully we start to get news on that front. Hopefully Soto could just sign within. I'm really, really hoping it's somehow before the winter meetings. I don't think it will be. I think you're right. I think it's going to be during. But man, I am hoping, like, give me a nice December 1st signing. Just a nice December 1st. Just don't go near Thanksgiving turkey. Don't go near Christmas tree. I don't need Dylan Betances deja vu. But give me some sort of start here to free agency.
I think if Juan Soto was smart and he really wanted to capitalize off this, he would do a LeBron 2.0 and do another decision on live TV.
Do a
Like
live
like
TV
imagine
decision.
like imagine to start off the winter meetings, like the official start, you first have everyone lined up and Soto's just at a table with all the hats, and then he ultimately picks one he's signing for. I think
Yeah,
that I think that would be ideal.
yeah, instead of the Trevor Bauer decision, which everyone knew by the time he dropped that YouTube video, which was also just hilarious. But yeah, I think that's really all there is to discuss in terms of the off season and everything. So did you have anything else you want to discuss before we wrap it up?
No, let's see what happens. Hopefully Soto signs before the winter meetings, but I don't think that's gonna happen. But yeah, like we discussed before, everything's on hold until he sets the market and until Corbin Burns signs the market for the pitchers. Other than that, you know, maybe apart from a couple little signings that we've seen, like Travis d'Arnaud and guys like that, and Kevin Newman, you're not going to see bigger guys in terms of that sign. So we just got to wait and see.
Yeah, the fabulous Los Angeles Angels are making moves before everyone. You got to give them credit for that, at least, even though nobody wants the guys they're signing. But that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching. In terms of the next episode, can't promise it's anytime soon. Obviously, next week's going to be a little bit difficult to get an episode out. So probably around December, around the winter meetings, we will probably do the next stream, unless, of course, there is huge breaking news. If Soto does sign, don't get it twisted. We will be live right away. Even if it's not to the Mets, we will be live to discuss where the Mets, of course, would have to pivot and all that other stuff if he was not to sign. But best case, he does sign, and we're talking about Juan Soto being a Met on stream and probably going for like 12 hours because we're so juiced up. But that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're Met fans. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. And we'll see you guys in the next one.